There's a holiday for everyone.
And that holiday is Xmas.
It is Xmas in August. We are 6 episodes deep into Futurama's first Hulu season, and they just gave us the first real canonical Xmas episode since literally 2001. Wild. And honestly, this is my favorite episode of the season, easily, delivering not only a great holiday-themed story, but a super fun time travel caper. I have almost no issues with this episode and so much to rave about, so let's just dive right in and talk about I Know What You Did Next Xmas. And also, if you want more Futurama analysis outside of this breakdown, I've got 2 recommendations for you. Make sure to check out my podcast, Cartoons That Curse. Toonerific Tariq and I have covered the entire series so far, including the newest episodes, and we'll be covering the rest of this season weekly, episode by episode. And Tariq actually just dropped what is easily one of my favorite Futurama videos I've ever seen about the classic episode A Leela of Her Own. I highly recommend watching that right after this video.
Subscribe.
In the history of Futurama, we've really only ever gotten about 4 Xmas-related stories. In the Fox era, we had 2 classic Xmas episodes, Xmas Story and A Tale of Two Santas, and those 2 honestly remain just about the only 2 real canonical Xmas-themed episodes in the entire show's history. We of course also got some Xmas-themed segments in the first DVD movie, Bender's Big Score, but it's hard to consider that story to be Xmas-themed, despite making it into the narrative a little bit. In the Comedy Central era, we only got a single holiday episode, and it was one of the anthology episodes, the Futurama Holiday Spectacular, all of which is entirely non-canonical. So even though this released in August, it's pretty cool to finally get another real Xmas-themed episode after 22 years, and damn did they deliver. As any Xmas story should start, the crew is making preparations to defend from Robot Santa's Xmas assault.
Santa's not getting past that, no way! Unless he knocks it down or something.
This episode honestly features some of my favorite ever Bender acting from John DiMaggio. I swear every other line is just absolutely perfect delivery.
I know what you did next Xmas. Okay, random.
But this episode does something pretty cool. It actually shows us the origin of Robot Santa. Sort of. We had previously heard his origins when he was first introduced back in Xmas Story, but this time we get to see the events in a Rankin and Bass style animated Xmas special. And they did such a great job naturally reintroducing this exposition to the audience. I complained a bit about how they handled exposition in Children of a Lesser Bog, and it feels like this one really figured out exactly how to fit this reacquainting of the Robot Santa origin into the narrative in a way that makes sense. Since this is Amy and Kif's kids' first Xmas, they all sit down to watch the special and they learn the history of Robot Santa. They took one of the newest developments from the Hulu season and used it seamlessly to reintroduce the audience to Robot Santa. Just really smart storytelling. Plus, there's a really fun subversion, since kids usually get upset when they learn Santa isn't real. This time, they're horrified because of how violent Santa is.
I'm sorry, kids. I never wanted you to know Santa was real.
And this short Robot Santa TV special leads us perfectly into the bigger narrative. The professor has decided that he's going to go back in time when Robot Santa was first constructed and rotate his naughty nice sensor so that he isn't evil anymore. He even modified the time machine from the late Philip J. Fry so that it can now go backwards in time, which does make sense given the dilemma they faced in the late Philip J. Fry. But man, I do kind of love that every time this time machine shows up, they make fun of Fry and his time travel antics.
That way you can't accidentally change history or do something disgusting like sleep with your own grandmother.
I wouldn't want to do that again.
Right on cue, the professor outright shames Fry in this newest episode.
But I'll go alone to minimize the chance of anyone becoming their own grandfather.
These things happen.
No, they don't.
And it's funny to see some acknowledgement of this from Leela now that they're firmly a couple. Definitely one of the things she has to look past when dating Fry. The time traveling sequence is a ton of fun, just like it was back in the late Philip J. Fry, as the professor starts to move backwards from 3023, which, sidebar, is a slight retcon since in the Impossible stream, Fry supposedly binged into 3024, at least according to the calendar in that episode. I guess they just kind of ignored that. But as soon as he starts moving backwards, we see the events of previous Futurama episodes. First, just earlier in this very episode as the gang is planking the windows, then we actually see the very end of last week's episode related to items you viewed as the crew all gathers around the smelloscope. After that, it jumps many years further. We see a quick glimpse of the day the Earth stood stupid when Fry was trying to re-educate everyone who had been made stupid by the brain spawn. Then we get a very quick glimpse of Fry's head on Amy's body from Put Your Head on My Shoulders, all before the professor lands in the year 2801. Though I will say, as fun as these are, are, they kinda made a little mistake by keeping these Xmas decorations on in the background. None of those should have been up during the events of any of the episodes they showed, but that's alright. Small detail. I did really like the short sequence in 2801. We see that the Planet Express building used to be a meat market, and I love the design of these old-timey hover cars. Just funny to see cars that look like they're from the early 1900s, but with hover abilities. The kind of fun retro future that Futurama usually delivers. Here's another fun detail. When the professor uses this penny to change Santa's settings, we can see that it actually has Penny Marshall's face on it, and the Lincoln Memorial on the back is actually the Laverne Memorial. Penny Marshall played Laverne on Laverne and Shirley. Alright, time for some more time travel minutia. When Farnsworth tries to go forward to 3023, he accidentally starts flying backwards in time and decides to go around. Another reference to how time is cyclical, as revealed in the resolution of the late Philip J. Fry. And we once again get a ton of details here, mostly from the episode The Late Philip J. Fry. We see the professor experience the Big Bang in reverse and then pop out in the year 1 billion, as seen at the end of TLPJF. That is not a great acronym. We get quick glimpses of the year 50 million with the Beautiful Woman Society, the year 10 million with the robot apocalypse, the year 5 million with the human race descendant flying Smurf dudes. For some reason, we briefly see the barren Earth again from the year 1 billion. Not exactly sure why, that might be a mistake. Then we get the frozen cityscape from the year 105. For just a few frames, we see all of the different statues of liberty of different species from the year 10,000. And then the good stuff. We get a quick look at the Planet Express building, and we can see a giant Bender punch through the wall and then walk off into the distance. Obviously, we've seen Bender become giant in Anthology of Interest 1, but that was just a what-if machine scenario, not canon. However, I'm thinking that this might be alluding to a future episode. There's actually this really cool ad in Times Square in which you can see Bender getting zapped by the professor's growth ray, blowing up to giant size. This hasn't been in any episodes this season. Maybe it's just something they cooked up for the amazing Times Square ad, or maybe it's something coming this or even next season. Futurama has hinted at future stories like this before. Okay, but then, probably what lots of people are talking about, a few frames of the inside of Dreamland Castle from Matt Groening's other series, Disenchantment. We get a glimpse of Bean, Lucy, and Elfo all hanging out in this room, which is actually the very same room that held its own Futurama Easter egg back in its season 1, where we get a quick flash of Bender, Fry, and Farnsworth in this very time machine. This obviously is going to reignite the Futurama Disenchantment shared universe discourse, and I will absolutely be participating. Stay tuned for a new video tomorrow where I break down all of the evidence and possibilities here. Though this shot of Disenchantment taking place before the giant Bender, timeline-wise, doesn't really make sense, but we'll go over it tomorrow. Anyways, let's dive into the episode proper. Crazy how much there is to dissect in just the setup of this episode. Because the professor has fixed Santa, the crew now has the opportunity to actually spend Xmas with their loved ones, which is a great subplot. Did anyone else love this little moment?
Uncle Fry, I hope you'll join me and Cubert at my chalet in the Bronx.
Farnsworth has never called him Uncle Fry before. That was sweet. In fact, the entire subplot is very sweet. I truly loved seeing all of the different crew families getting together to celebrate Xmas. It was cool to see Kif and Amy's new big family all together. We haven't seen much Cubert in forever, even dating back to the Comedy Central era. He did not show up all that much. And seeing him having fun with the professor and Fry was really nice. Side note, I thought for a moment that this Yeti with the professor was supposed to be the Yeti that infected him back in the tip of the Zoidberg, but they actually have entirely different designs. Just a new Yeti gag. The whole bit about every family making their own version of turducken was really funny, but I don't think anything beats the live turducken from the sewers.
Are they hard to catch?
Oh no, they crave death.
I was also a huge fan of this little exchange between Fry and Leela's grandmother. He calls her the Rose of the Sewers, a nice little nod to her land Titanic origin from The Mutants Are Revolting. Rose being the character in the film Titanic, obviously.
Leela, if you don't marry him, I will.
And it's nice to see them explicitly tease a real marriage between Fry and Leela too. All of these family-centric subplots were really lovely, the kind of heartwarming stuff I crave in Futurama, but they also did not sacrifice the comedy. And the families all spending Xmas together sets up the true A story, which is that the only two crew members without a family, Zoidberg and Bender, end up spending the holiday together. Now, I know this one aspect is going to upset some fans, and I was bummed at first too. The episode never mentions or acknowledges Zoidberg's girlfriend, Marianne, suggesting that they may just be ignoring her outright in the revival. It's obviously possible that they could bring her back in future episodes, but the lack of any mention of her here definitely seems suspicious. I think they could have probably explained away her absence in a single line, that she's spending the holiday with her family overseas or something. She did have a British accent after all, but even if they don't bring her back, I do understand why they would go this route, even though it's a bummer to longtime fans of the show. The reality is that the only real reason Zoidberg had this development was because the show was coming to a close back in 2013. It was the penultimate episode of the Comedy Central run, and they wanted to give Zoidberg his happy ending. Zoidberg's entire shtick is being lonely and pathetic, and while I do wish they would try their best to maintain that shtick with Marianne in the picture, it totally tracks that they might want to revert him to his single status. But this is literally my only gripe with this episode, because pairing Zoidberg and Bender works brilliantly here. It's kind of crazy that across all of the previous eras of the show, we never really got a proper Zoidberg-Bender team-up episode, and even though Bender has historically been super antagonistic to Zoidberg, I'm shocked they didn't make this pairing sooner, because they actually have a lot in common. At their core, both Bender and Zoidberg want to be loved and appreciated. We've seen numerous episodes where Zoidberg seeks companionship and friendship. We've seen countless episodes where Bender gets jealous or attempts to achieve something that will leave him adored or remembered. Seeking that kind of connection is a major part of both of their personalities, and so I loved seeing them commiserate over their lack of familial relationships, which leads them to this conclusion.
We could drunk drive the time machine to last Xmas and kidnap him. Then he won't be able to deliver presents this Xmas.
So their jealousy leads them to try and ruin everyone else's Xmas, which is very Bender. Usually through the adversity he faces, Zoidberg maintains a really sweet and positive outlook, but I actually love seeing Bender be the bad influence on him. It kind of reminds me of the two Zoidbergs wallowing in anger in the Farnsworth paradox. And this is the real highlight of the episode, in my opinion. Zoidberg and Bender not only perform a time kidnapping of Santa, they eventually end up murdering him. This is the Bender and Zoidberg have to hide a dead body episode. Just comic gold. And I did not expect that seeing Zoidberg do the Bender would give me like a heartwarming feeling, but here we are.
Do the Bender!
This entire storyline is not only hilarious, but shockingly heartfelt, with Bender and Zoidberg finding refuge in each other through their own insecurities.
You know, Zoidberg, you're only half as bad as I thought you were.
That means a lot.
And every single way they tried to dispose of Santa's corpse was super funny. And obviously throughout this process, Bender and Zoidberg's newfound relationship really starts to fall apart.
I wish we'd never become friends.
We're not friends, and we never were.
But we danced and murdered.
But they managed to escalate everything perfectly, with the entire Planet Express crew showing up to spend Xmas with Zoidberg and Bender. Not only does this create drama and suspense, with Zoidberg and Bender disposing of the body while the crew stands outside, but the fact that the crew came to see them would have been exactly what they needed to quell their insecurities about being alone on Xmas. The very insecurities that led them to kidnap Santa in the first place. Just such a tightly written script all around, truly. Especially when it comes to the perfect double twist at the end of the episode. First, Farnsworth realizes that when he went back in time to fix Santa, he actually set his sensor to naughty. He was the origin of Santa becoming evil all along.
Oh, I've made a complete fry of myself.
But then the real twist, while the crew is hiding from Santa, Zoidberg and Bender appear in the time machine, revealing that they had actually kidnapped Santa from this Xmas, not the previous Xmas.
Damn it, Bender, I'm a doctor, not a time machine guy.
God, this is just such a perfectly executed storyline, both from a sci-fi twist perspective and from a comedic perspective.
I think I speak for everyone when I say,
There were even hints early in the episode that this was happening, and even though I saw them, I totally misconstrued them as lazy animation. When Zoidberg and Bender first kidnap Santa, I noticed that on the wall you can still see all of the tiny stockings for Nibbler's worms, as well as the 3 below Amy stockings for her kids. And I realized that if they had gone back to last Xmas, those stockings shouldn't have been there since they're all new developments. But stupid me, I thought this was just them being lazy with swapping out the backgrounds and that it was a mistake, as As it turns out, it was a hint all along. The episode maybe ends the tiniest bit unceremoniously, after the reveal that the I know what you did next Xmas threats were all because Santa knew Bender became friends with Zoidberg. But man, I have so little to criticize about this episode, especially with the Kwanzaa rap to close things out, along with a gorgeous in memory of Coolio end card. This very well may be Coolio's final on-screen appearance, and it really hit hard that they were able to wrap the episode up with this tribute. Rest in peace, Coolio. I had access to screeners for these first 6 episodes since a bit before the season started airing, and this was the one I've been most excited to talk about and hear people's reactions to. I've rewatched it maybe 4 or 5 times at this point, and it honestly just keeps getting stronger. Easily the standout so far this season. It feels like the show is mostly firing on all cylinders here. Incredibly strong character work with such a fun pairing, wildly funny storyline, a great twist baked into the time travel plot, and tons of tiny details for Futurama fans to obsess over. And it was honestly just great to see a real Xmas episode again. I was not a fan of the Futurama Holiday Spectacular, which wasn't even canon. It's literally been 22 years since we got one of these. I wouldn't go so far as to call this an S-tier episode or anything, but I honestly think it might hit A-tier for me. I just had so much damn fun with this thing, and the longer it lives in my head, the more I appreciate it. This was the first Futurama script from writer Ariel Ladenson, and I am wildly impressed. I cannot wait to see your next episode. Next week is the already highly controversial COVID episode, so we'll see how things shake out there. Only 4 episodes left until the first Futurama Hulu season is in the books. Can't believe we're this close. Before I go, I also want to once again shout out the writers and actors strikes. Please show your support for the creatives who make these shows possible. I'll be posting a link in the description for resources that can help support these striking workers. And do not forget to check out my video tomorrow about Futurama and Disenchantment's shared universe. And I still want to hear what you think about the latest Futurama episodes and the new season in general. Did you like I Know What You Did Next Xmas as much as I did? Did you miss real actual Xmas episodes? Let me know below in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
I stay mellow watching Johnny Two Cellos. He talks cartoons, he's a really cool fellow. He keeps you posted on adult cartoons. If that's what you're into, then grab a spoon and a very big bowl of your favorite cereal. Feels like Saturday morning cartoon material. Johnny Two Cellos, watch him on YouTube. Now enjoy this groove and bust a move.